can't believe I'm saying it, but 2022 has finally arrived. And with this year, what's come with it? Okay, 1, ridiculously high stock market prices, essentially a 13-year bull market run. 2, an inflation increase by almost 5 times the amount in a single year. And 3, the economy has more debt than ever before after a pandemic. Just everywhere we look, bad news, bad news, bad news. And it can be tough to know what to do with our money. What do we invest in? And one person that I like to go to when trying to answer this question is a man called Warren Buffett, known as one of the greatest investors of all time. What's he investing in this year in these pretty crazy times? So Buffett's largest position by a country mile is a very, very well-known company. I'm sure you've heard of it. Apple. And by the way, when I say Buffett, I mean Berkshire Hathaway, the investment company that he manages and has his net worth in. So Buffett, he owns 887 million shares in Apple, which makes up 42.78% of his stock portfolio. And just to be clear, we're going to start with his publicly traded stock portfolio, okay? So the total value that he owns in Apple is $125 billion. That is one heck of a position. That's 4 times larger than his next biggest holding. And Buffett first started buying Apple way back in May 2016 for a price of around $23-ish a share, and he kept buying all the way up until Q1 of 2018. As of today, it's gone up by around 4 to 8 times in terms of price since he bought, and Buffett hasn't sold, he's still holding it as by far his largest stock. Second largest stock position belongs to the second largest bank in America, which is Bank of America. Bit of a tongue twister there. So Warren Buffett, he holds $42 billion of Bank of America stock, worth 14.6% of the overall portfolio. The stock, it sells under the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol BAC, if you want to look at buying. So Buffett bought Bank of America through the exercise of a warrant, which had a strike price of $7.14. He then also increased his stake by 30% in the third quarter of 2018 at a price of around $30. So this gives him an overall cost basis for Apple stock of $14. Now we look today at the stock price, it's $46 a share, so Buffett has made some very good profit. Now the PE ratio is nice and low compared to the current market, it's sitting at 13.8, and they do pay a bit of a dividend with a yield of 1.89%. American Express, the credit card service company, it comes in at number 3 for Buffett's portfolio that he manages. The value is $45.4 billion. He owns 150,000 shares, worth 8.66% of the total portfolio. The stock itself is a very value-oriented stock, pretty normal for Buffett to go for. Price is $173, fairly low PE ratio in this market of 18.1. It's got a bit of a dividend as well, 1%. And if we look at Guru Focus's analysis of the intrinsic value, it comes at around $214 a share. So based on that, it's selling for discounts. Now we're moving on to Coca-Cola, one of Buffett's favorite investments, and I remember watching an interview where he said he would never sell Coca-Cola stock. It makes up 7.15% of the stock portfolio, worth $20.1 billion, and Buffett bought into the stock way back in 1988. Now this means that through the stock he owns big name beverage brands such as Fanta, Sprite, Smart Water, and a range of other billion-dollar brands. This next stock even further shows you how into the food and beverage industry that Buffett is. He owns $11.9 billion in Kraft Heinz stock, and this comes at his 5th largest position, worth 4.09% of the portfolio. Kraft Heinz stock, many people consider this a value play still, with its crash in price over the past couple of years. It's got a low market cap, it's got a high dividend of 4.4%, and a reasonable PE ratio of 19.5. So Warren Buffett's 6th, 8th, and 10th largest position are all bank/financial stocks. So that means that 5 out of his top 10 largest stocks are banks or financial services companies. So coming in at 6 is Moody's, the finance company, worth $8.7 billion at 3% of the portfolio. Coming in at 8th largest is US Bancorp, worth $7.5 billion at 2.5%. And the 10th largest stock is Bank of New York Mellon, worth $3.7 billion at 1.3% of the portfolio. So one sector that Buffett is heavily invested in 2022 is the banking and financial services sector. And you might ask why. That's a fair question. So there's a couple of key reasons for this. One is because you want to own stocks that companies need in order to do business and make the economy run. That's what banks are for. Also, we should remember that Buffett likes to buy things when everyone is scared and panicking. And he did this with the banking sector. American Express, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs were all signature post-crash Buffett bailout buys, which led to large returns. Okay, the stocks that weren't banking that we skipped were Verizon, the wireless network company. This is worth $8.5 billion at 2.92% of the portfolio. And then we got DaVita Healthcare at number 9, which is worth $4.2 billion at 1.4% of the portfolio. And those are the top 10 largest positions that Buffett owns coming into 2022. Then General Motors and Charter Communications are his 11th and 12th largest positions, worth 1.08 and 1.04% of the portfolio respectively. And the rest of the stocks that he owns are all worth less than 1% each. And I'm not going to show you all of those very small, slightly insignificant positions, but some of the ones that stand out as interesting small positions that Buffett holds are, we got Amazon, the giant e-commerce company, which has seen some pretty impressive growth over the past couple of years. Berkshire also bought Snowflake, which is a very different investment than Buffett normally goes for. First of all, it IPO'd recently, and Buffett normally avoids IPOs, but not this time though. And secondly, it's a cloud computing based data warehousing company. It's not Buffett's general investments. So this tells me it must have been someone else at Berkshire that bought it. And Kroger is another one of the smaller positions that Buffett holds. Again, it proves how much he likes retail and food companies. Then Visa, another small position worth 0.7% of the portfolio. Again, it increases his holdings in the financial area of the market this year. And if we break his portfolio down by sector, the largest by far is the technology sector worth 43.2%. Wait, what? Warren Buffett and technology? That doesn't make sense. Nah, but remember, Buffett's largest position is Apple, a technology stock. So that's where this large percentage fits into place. The second largest sector is the financial services one at 31.7%. And we've talked about all of the financial stocks that Buffett owns and why he likes this sector so much. The third largest sector is the consumer defensive one at 12.7%. This is all of his food and beverage companies like Coca-Cola, Kraft Heinz, Kroger, etc. So what can we learn from this? It's that Buffett, he buys what he understands. He understands food, he understands consumers, and he understands that side of the market. He understands banks, and he understands the ins and outs of financial services. He understands Apple stock, which is essentially a consumer-oriented business. He sticks to what he knows, and we should too. If we understand technology and the internet, look at the stocks in those sectors. If you understand cars, well, look at stocks like Ford or Tesla or Toyota, etc. If you're into beauty and cosmetics, well, what are the companies that dominate and are growing in this sector? The lesson that we can learn from Buffett is to invest in the areas that we know and like. So what I've just shown you is his publicly held stocks that he legally has to disclose. However, we have to realize that Buffett owns a lot of businesses privately as well. For example, the insurance company Geico Buffett owns 100% of. The sweet companies, See's Candy and Dairy Queen, he owns 100% and 99% of. Nebraska Furniture Mart, he owns 80% of. BNSF Railway Company, he acquired outright for $34 billion. Duracell, the battery company, he owns as well. So Buffett's portfolio is mixed between both private companies and publicly traded companies. And generally, as we saw, it's the simple companies that Buffett likes to own. The food companies, the railway, the furniture stores, the batteries, the ones whose business model he can understand easily. Another important thing that I want to show you is how Buffett is balanced between cash and stocks this year. So altogether, between both his publicly traded stocks and his privately owned businesses, he has $310.7 billion invested. Then, if we look at the cash that he has a lot. It comes up to $144 billion in cash and cash equivalents. And by the way, most of that is in short-term treasury bills. So that means that 32% of his entire portfolio is cash and the other 68% is businesses. That is quite a high cash percentage, especially for Buffett. He generally prefers to buy stocks than hold on to cash, which doesn't really grow. It just gets eaten at by inflation. But in this market, with things being so pricey, he's struggling to find those value investments to buy, so he's playing the game safely. And that is what Buffett owns in 2022. A lot of bank stocks, a lot of consumer stocks. He's investing very patiently. He didn't buy much last year. He's letting his cash accumulate, and I think he's waiting for stocks to get cheaper before he leaps in and starts buying big again.